Hey, it's Jim and Prashant here again from Devtron. I'm going to ask Prashant an interesting question today. Prashant, why did you start Devtron and what's the mission of the company?
That's a question which is very close to my heart, Jim. So, in my previous avatars, right, I have been in different places, in different roles, doing startups, starting up startups to being head of technology in a very, very fast growing, very big company, right? And we have been sort of looking at different things and we figured out something which was constant as a struggle when you are growing at a very, very fast pace, whether you're a small startup or you're a large organization. And typically, what we saw was the collaboration between the developers and the DevOps, right? So the tools which existed, they leaked domain of DevOps, because of which what would happen is DevOps people would be very comfortable with those products. The products that were being created for DevOps people. They were not being created for developers. So they would be very comfortable with the tools, but developers would not be. And because of that, DevOps team would even be afraid of giving access to the developers, because if they give them access, what would happen if they make some changes and those things break? Because developers don't understand the tools and they may do it accidentally, right? And the other thing which compounded the problem was the plethora of tools which existed, which were great in a very like highly vertical space, but they were not good horizontally. So what that essentially meant was, one, I had to understand each tool as it lead domain, and then I had to apply the transformation of the domain from one to another as I moved from, let's say, build to deployment environment or for debugging environment, right? So there was nothing which sort of connected the wire together. So the cognitive load for the developers also started increasing. So we saw this as a constant thread across, but we thought that if this thing has to be done, something more fundamental has to change, right? Why? Because every company had a unique fingerprint. They would be doing things, writing a script, using tools in their own fashion. And we thought that that's difficult to change the mindset, right? But then in 2016, 17, when we came across Kubernetes, we were like, oh, this is the tool that we had been waiting for, right? Because it made everything explicit via APIs. So it became very easy for you to have a uniform language which every company could understand. And then we thought, essentially saying that, oh, now since Kubernetes has come, so now this problem is solved and it no longer would exist, because now the uniform interface is there. So people can easily build those kind of tools which work beautifully across and abstract out the cognitive overload also. But to our surprise, even when we were like looking at it in 2018, 19, 20, we could still see the same thing was happening again. So you had like highly vertical tools, don't talk to each other, and leak domain. And we were like, oh, this still needs to be solved. And we wanted to solve it in such a fashion that every company, irrespective of how much funding they have raised, how many technical people they employ, they should be able to have this advantage where DevOps and developers should work together seamlessly to create the competitive advantage for the company. And that was the genesis of Devtron, where we thought that eventually what we would want is that any company or any person who installs Kubernetes should be installing Devtron first, because Devtron abstracts out the knowledge of Kubernetes in a human understandable and human readable format and takes a lot of good decisions for you out of the box, which you can, of course, fine tune over time and modify to fit more of your requirement, your organization's requirement based on what kind of developers you are working with, how you're looking at growth, what kind of DevOps team you have. That was the genesis and that was the thought with which we started Devtron. And that's also one of the reasons why I kept it open source, because we thought that organizations should not, only organizations who have raised a lot of money, only them should not be having this benefit. Any company which wants to sort of focus on their competitive advantage and help their developers and DevOps lead a healthier and better life focused on the competitive advantage, that's where Devtron would help them achieve their goals. So that was the idea with which me and my co-founders started this organization.
All right. Thanks, Prashant. So if Devtron sounds interesting to you, you can find us at devtron.ai and we'd love to talk to you.